Killing Eve ended its third season with a big scene for Carolyn Martins, and I, Riley Chow of Gold Derby, am here with actress Fiona Shaw to talk about it. Now, in that climax, we have a loaded gun, the four core characters of the show, and one other guy. So what do you think Carolyn deduces from all the information that she gets in that scene before pulling the trigger? And do you feel that you are on the same page as her with the conclusions that she's drawn, whatever they may be, about how Kenny died and who has betrayed her?
What do I think? I was very surprised that Carolyn would go towards a gun, because there's no doubt that she had a very exciting earlier life in the Secret Service, but I never had to face the fact that any of it might ever have included a gun. I've always thought that Carolyn allowed other people to have guns and would take responsibility or sort of for the paperwork, but never actually be pulling the trigger. So it was an amazing fact that we were heading towards this scene. But of course, like anybody else, this really wasn't about the formality of the Secret Service. It was about the fact that a mother was trying to find some resolution about her son's death. And that's a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it? Yeah. So I was, she's pretty sure. She saw Constantine with Kenny, so she knows he has something to do with it. And by then he has lost all credibility. I mean, we nobody trusts him an inch. But what is really cruel is somebody who you may have been very intimate once with, even though you play games of betrayal, actually really betraying you. I think that was very, very, what would you say, unrecoverable from, I don't think their friendship will recover. Yeah.
Now, why did that scene take days to shoot, and what changed over the course of shooting it?
We shot it for days, and I only saw it the other day. I hadn't seen it, and we shot it. I think it took 3 or 4 days to shoot, and the majority of that shooting was the camera on some angle of me or from me or around me. So I was standing for 4 days with that gun. And the two girls, Eve and Villanelle, just came and joined to watch it. And they just sat on a sofa for 4 days. So they had a bowl, or, what I had to do it, I was standing. And of course, when the scene is edited together, I was laughing the other day, thinking, my goodness, it looks like we all just shot it one afternoon and they were, half the scene. They were about 1/100th of the scene. But of course, when it's edited, they're a good half of the scene. And we did get hysterical laughing at I just love that thing about the toxic workplace that Villanelle justified her kill with. But I think it was a very, very hard scene to do, in that we, both Kim and I, Kim who plays Constantine and I, found that in order to believe such a scene, you have to work very, very hard. And we did. We didn't enjoy ourselves particularly. We really concentrated and disappeared and didn't talk very much with anyone. So I stayed very, very tightly concentrated for 4 days. It was just before Christmas, and I was about to go to Sri Lanka. But I was exhausted when we finished it. And sad. I was very sad.
So much of the show is about them tracking Villanelle and the 12. But in this finale, Villanelle, Paul, and Constantine, they can all easily be apprehended, I think. Yet it doesn't even seem to cross Carolyn's mind. So what is her goal these days?
Oh, no, I think she would like to get the 12. Whether she, at this moment, thinks the 12 are real, or whether there's some amorphous power to do with, whether the 12 are 12 people, or whether it's just one little man like the Wizard of Oz behind a curtain. Who knows what the 12 are? Or whether they're an idea. And I think either she's so upset about Kenny, but she begins to think it's a sort of atmospheric idea, doesn't she? She says, you're never going to catch the 12, she says to Eve. But Paul is near the 12. I mean, clearly Paul has got bosses, or had bosses, who are higher than him. And I think Carolyn in the series needs to get nearer the 12. I think she will. That's all I can say. I think she will. Of course, a lot of people are suspicious that Carolyn herself is part of the 12, but she's certainly done a lot to try and track them. But the capturing of Villanelle, I don't think Villanelle worries Carolyn at all. she's been a terrible distraction for Eve and has stopped Eve being the kind of wonderful protege that Carolyn thought she would be. And I love my scenes with Sandra. I've enjoyed since the beginning. Whenever I have a scene with Sandra, I feel a sort of G major chord. I feel we're absolutely on track, and we have a lovely scene in a restaurant in this one. And I feel we're going back to, really going back to basics when I'm acting with Eve. But I have had very little to do with her because they fall out so frightfully. But it's partially because Eve has distracted herself with this obsession with Villanelle. But Carolyn isn't bothered by Villanelle, not particularly. She's interested in her murders, but she's not interested in her as a person. She recognizes her. They have similar traits. They both love clothes. They both are quite unsentimental about death. And they're both sort of addicted to that life that is not domestic.
You mentioned that Villanelle's been a distraction for Eve, but how much responsibility do you think Carolyn actually feels for Eve? Because I feel like as viewers, we kind of assume that they're these great friends, but I think really they're kind of only seeing each other over the course of this investigation and this show.
Well, in the last two series, I was very surprised. I thought that by series 3, Eve would be back under Carolyn's wing. They fell out rather spectacularly in series 2, and Eve went and off and did her own thing and began turning up at the house and speaking to Constantine at Carolyn's house. But I feel, my deep feeling goes back to season 1, actually, which is that Carolyn knows that Eve is very talented and very instinctive and very emotional. And that, of course, to be a very, very good person for MI6, you've got to kind of harness your emotions. And Eve just can't do it. She's a bit of a mess, but she's also very intuitive. And she's very ambivalent about her private life. And Karen is not interested in that. She just wants her to be good at this job. And normally we never see Carolyn at home. We never see her in her private life. But due to the death of Kenny, the camera sort of snuck in and began to follow Carolyn from the office to home. So that was a big part of my season. But I think that, I just keep hoping that Carolyn will resolve with Eve because the two of them could do great things.
Yeah, we did see Carolyn at home this season. You got a grown daughter named Geraldine, who you booted at the end, which weirdly seemed to please the fans. Why do you think there's such a poor response to Geraldine?
Well, I think a lot of people, I have to say, a lot of women I know of that age say that, their relationships with their mothers are quite difficult. A mother can absolutely mutilate a daughter. I have a mother, and she can mutilate me in a phrase. It's usually something to do with my hair. So I think Carolyn is very tough on her daughter because literally, as is the fault line of genetics, is just that Carolyn could not be more different to Geraldine. Geraldine is pure emotion, unrigorous, unable to be analytical, just deals in instinct. And I have no doubt, sympathetically to Geraldine, she's become like that because she's in profound reaction to her mum. But the result is that they're never, ever going to be a natural partnership. And I think, Carolyn says it. She says, this isn't good for you to be here thinking you're doing good by helping me. But in fact, you're just wasting your life. It's tough.
Yeah. So this season picked up 6 months after last. Did the writers tell you what Carolyn was up to over the hiatus, or what do you think she was getting up to?
Not over the hiatus. You wait. In fact, I do know a little bit about season 4, which I'm not going to tell you now, because it would ruin it for you. But we normally have a conversation around this time of year before they start writing the kind of vague arc of the next season. And really, the thing that has surprised me is how Carolyn has caught maybe the imagination, maybe the older viewers, who knows? But a lot more has been written for Carolyn. I always thought I would swoop in and swoop out again, but actually she's becoming more and more present, and therefore the story's getting more complex in relation to Carolyn, which I'm enjoying very much. So we talk about it, and I can make suggestions. Last season I suggested modern opera as being the thing that I think Carolyn likes, but they mix it up a bit. They do some modern opera and some old-fashioned opera. But I sang Lucretia or never again should we two dare to part, which is from Benjamin Britten's Rape of Lucretia, which is about a very sad moment when a husband knows that he will never be able to know his wife again. I thought it was a good thing to put in a scene with saying goodbye to Kenny without anybody knowing the truth of it.
The show has gone through 3 or 4 lead writers now, who I imagine have very different styles. How has Carolyn differed season to season on a script level? And do you play into that, or do you try to neutralize it?
I don't, Carolyn is in some ways a mystery to me. I just play her, and I feel I know her very well, but I don't sculpt her. I think at her best, I play what I know to be the inside of her mind. She knows an enormous amount. And because she knows so much, her brain goes so fast that she's always trying to soothe her mind, I think, by deflecting to very ordinary things. So it's often quite amusing if she talks about chops or Coke cans or rats drinking from Coke cans. She has a sort of magnet mind, and it can go anywhere in a second and then back to the laser problem. And, it doesn't really matter what the writers write as long as they allow me to play that, because the essence of Carolyn is that.
You're a Tony nominee and Olivier winner, and I noticed that whenever you talk about Suzanne Heathcote, you make sure to mention that she's a playwright. So how did that background manifest?
You mean Suzanne's background as a playwright?
Yeah.
Well, it was just, it's not because I had been in the theatre for so long, which I had. It was that there's a sort of, she writes quite long scenes. I mean, the last scene of Killing Eve this season, the 2 women by the bridge, is a long scene. The scene before is like a sort of Agatha Christie meets, it's a sort of resolution scene of quite emotional. So I think that Suzanne has the understanding that it's not just in the picture that the story unfolds, but in what people say, in what they hide, and what they intend to say. And she allows them to be in the scene long enough that you can see them change from the beginning of the scene to the end, which is very much what happens in plays, that you see the actual emotional shifts in front of your eye rather than the camera doing it. I also think there's a wonderful couple of scenes when Carolyn is driving with Constantine, and Constantine's daughter is being taught to drive by Villanelle. I mean, this is very much a playwriting skill of balanced structure, the structure of those 2 things, even though it's filmic. So I that's why I mention it, is that it seems quite theatrical in a very good way.
So you won the BAFTA for season 1. You were nominated for the Emmy for season 2, also nominated for another Emmy last year. So this year, if you're nominated for supporting actress at the Emmys again, is there an episode from the 3rd season that you think you would want to submit as your showcase for viewing on the Academy website?
I never think of it like that. I mean, my favorite scene that I enjoyed was being in the bath, because I had suggested that. I'd always thought the character should be in the bath. In fact, it was a very uncomfortable bath, but I saw it in my mind's eye as a much more glamorous bath. But I wouldn't have thought that episode would be the one that anybody might want to see again. I mean, who knows? Maybe the last episode, which is full of things. But I think it's very cruel that they always pick just one episode, because, of course, the story is one long story that develops during the 8 episodes. It really is, and I feel it as that. I don't feel it as episodes.
Now, this is a show that really shoots on location across the continent, and a lot of it has nothing to do with Carolyn. So I'm wondering, during the shooting season, how much are you still in the world of Killing Eve on those days, or maybe even weeks, when the show might be off, somewhere else?
Well, when I mean, you really are looking behind the scenes now. You're lifting on the curtain. When Villanelle was in Russia trying to discover her family, I was in New York, going to a lot of movies and having a lovely few weeks. So that was unusually, I had a whole section of time off. So I was able to go to New York for a couple of weeks. But normally I stay around, and actually it is an interesting question. When we're shooting Killing Eve, I'm pretty concentrated on it. you know, if I have a glass of wine, I'm guilty. I try and stay fit, go for a lot of walks, running, you know, my Pilates, whatever. But I don't try and distract myself too much. Of course, you know, days off are lovely, but it does take a lot of concentration. You have to meditate about it, but I enjoy it, of course, as well.
Okay, Fiona. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Hopefully, you get nominated for another Emmy, and we'll find out which episode you pick.
Well, that's very generous of you. You get to offer me one.
Yeah. And to our viewers, you can check out our other interviews with Emmy contenders on our YouTube channel and go to goldderby.com to make your own Emmy predictions.